company resorted to direct military confrontation when it saw a threat to its political or economic interests. This can be illustrated with the case of the southern Indian state of Mysore. Mysore had grown in strength under the leadership of powerful rulers like Hyder Ali, who ruled from 1761 to 1782, and his famous son Tipu Sultan, who ruled from 1782 to 1799. Mysore controlled the profitable trade of the Malabar coast, where the company purchased pepper and cardamom. In 1785, Tipu Sultan stopped the export of sandalwood, pepper and cardamom through the ports of his kingdom and disallowed local merchants from relationship with the French in India and modernized his army with their help. The British were furious. They saw Hyder and Tipu as ambitious, arrogant and dangerous rulers who had to be controlled and crushed. 4 wars were fought with Mysore, 1767 to 69, in 1780 to 84, 1790 to 92, and in 1799. Only in the last, the Battle of Srirangapattam, did the company ultimately win a victory. Tipu Sultan was killed defending his capital, Srirangapattam. Mysore was placed under the former ruling dynasty of the Vadiyars, and a subsidiary alliance was imposed on the state. The legend of Tipu. Kings are often surrounded by legends and their powers glorified through folklore. Here is a legend about Tipu Sultan, who became the ruler of Mysore in 1782. It is said that once he went hunting in the forest with a French friend. There he came face to face with a tiger. His gun did not work and his dagger fell to the ground. He battled with the tiger unarmed till he managed to reach down and pick up the dagger. Finally, he was able to kill the tiger in the battle. After this, he came to be known as the Tiger of Mysore. He had the image of the tiger on his flag. War with the Marathas. From the late 18th century, the company also sought to curb and eventually destroy Maratha power. With their defeat in the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, the Marathas' dream of ruling from Delhi was shattered. They were divided into many states under different chiefs, that is Sardars, belonging to dynasties such as Sindhya, Holkar, Gaikwad, and Bhosle. These chiefs were held together in a confederacy under a Peshwa or a principal minister who became its effective military and administrative head based in Pune. Mahatji Sindhya and Nana Furnace were 2 famous Maratha soldiers and statesmen of the late 18th century. The Marathas were subdued in a series of wars. In the first war, that ended in 1782 with the Treaty of Salbai, there was no clear victor. The Second Anglo-Maratha War, from 1803 to 1805, was fought on different fronts, resulting in the British gaining Orissa and the territories north of the Yamuna River, including Agra and Delhi. Finally, the Third Anglo-Maratha War of 1817 to 1819 crushed Maratha power. The Peshwa was removed and sent away to Bittur near Kanpur with a pension. The company now had complete control over the territories south of the Vindhyas. The claim to paramountcy. It is clear from the above that from the early 19th century, the company pursued an aggressive policy of territorial expansion. Under Lord Hastings, Governor-General from 1813 to 1823, a new policy of paramountcy was initiated. Now the company claimed that its authority was paramount or supreme, hence its power was greater than that of Indian states. In order to protect its interests, it was justified in annexing or threatening to annex any Indian kingdom. This view continued to guide later British policies as well. This process, however, did not go unchallenged. For example, when the British tried to annex the small state of Kittur in Karnataka today, Rani Chennamma took to arms and led an anti-British resistance movement. She was arrested in 1824 and died in prison in 1829. But Rayanna, a poor chowkidar of Sangoli in Kittur, carried on the resistance. With popular support, he destroyed many British camps and records. He was caught and hanged by the British in 1830. You will read more about several cases of resistance later in the book. In the late 1830s, the East India Company became worried about Russia. It imagined that Russia might expand across Asia and enter India from the northwest. Driven by this fear, the British now wanted to secure their control over the northwest. They fought a prolonged war with Afghanistan between 1838 and 1842 and established indirect company rule there. Sindh was taken over in 1843. Next in line was Punjab. But the presence of Maharaja Ranjit Singh held back the company. After his death in 1839, two prolonged wars were fought with the Sikh kingdom. Ultimately, in 1849, Punjab was annexed. The doctrine of lapse. The final wave of annexations occurred under Lord Dalhousie, who was the Governor-General from 1848 to 1856. He devised a policy that came to be known as the doctrine of lapse. The doctrine declared that if an Indian ruler died without a male heir, his kingdom would lapse, that is, become part of the company territory. One kingdom after another was annexed simply by applying this doctrine. Satara in 1848, Sambalpur in 1850, Udaipur 1852, Nagpur in 1853, and Jhansi in 1854. Finally, in 1856, the company also took over Awadh. This time the British had an added argument. They said they were obliged by duty to take over Awadh in order to free the people from the misgovernment of the Nawab. Enraged by the humiliating way in which the Nawab was deposed, the people of Awadh joined the great revolt that broke out in 1857, setting up a new administration. Warren Hastings, the Governor-General from 1773 to 1785, was one of the many important figures who played a significant role in the expansion of company power. By his time, the company had acquired power not only in Bengal but also in Bombay and Madras. British territories were broadly divided into administrative units called presidencies. There were 3 presidencies: Bengal, Madras, and Bombay. Each was ruled by a governor. The supreme head of the administration was the Governor-General. Warren Hastings, the first Governor-General, introduced several administrative reforms, notably in the sphere of justice. From 1772, a new system of justice was established. Each district was to have two courts, a criminal court, that is, the Faujdari Adalat, and a civil court, the Diwani Adalat. Maulvis and Hindu Pandits interpreted Indian laws for the European district collectors who presided over civil courts. The criminal courts were still under a Qazi and a Mufti, but under the supervision of the collectors. Qazi means a judge. Mufti means a jurist of the Muslim community responsible for expounding the law that the Qazi would administer. A major problem was that the Brahman Pandits gave different interpretations of local laws based on different schools of the Dharam Shastra. Dharam Shastras means Sanskrit texts prescribing social rules and codes of behavior, composed from the century 500 BCE onwards. To bring about uniformity, in 1775, 11 Pandits were asked to compile a digest of Hindu laws. N.B. Halher translated this digest into English. By 1778, a code of Muslim laws was also compiled for the benefit of European judges. Under the Regulating Act of 1773, a new Supreme Court was established, while a Court of Appeal, the Sardar Nizamat Adalat, was also set up at Calcutta. The principal figure in an Indian district was the collector. As the title suggests, his main job was to collect revenue and taxes and maintain law and order in his district with the help of judges, police officers and darogas. His office, the Collectorate, became the new centre of power and patronage that steadily replaced previous holders of authority. The Company Army. Colonial rule in India brought in some new ideas of administration and reform, but its power rested on its military strength. The Mughal army was mainly composed of cavalry. Savars means trained soldiers on horseback, and infantry, that is, paidal or foot soldiers. They were given training in archery, called tir andazi, and the use of the sword. The cavalry dominated the army, and the Mughal state did not feel the need to have a large, professionally trained infantry. The rural areas had a large number of armed peasants, and the local zamindars often supplied the Mughals with paidal soldiers. A change occurred in the 18th century when Mughal successor states like Awadh and Banaras started recruiting peasants into their armies and training them as professional soldiers. The East India Company adopted the same method when it began recruitment for its own army, which came to be known as the Sepoy Army, from the Indian word Sipahi, meaning soldier. As warfare technology changed from the 1820s, the cavalry requirements of the company's army declined. This is because the British Empire was fighting in Burma, Afghanistan, and Egypt, where soldiers were armed with muskets and matchlocks. Musket means a heavy gun used by infantry soldiers. Matchlock means an early type of gun in which the powder was ignited by a match. The soldiers of the company's army had to keep pace with changing military requirements, and its infantry regiments now became more important. In the early 19th century, the British began to develop a uniform military culture. Soldiers were increasingly subjected to European-style training, drill, and discipline that regulated their life far more than before. Often this created problems since caste and community feelings were ignored in building a force of professional soldiers. Could individuals so easily give up their caste and religious feelings? Could they see themselves only as soldiers and not as members of communities? How did the sepoys feel? How did they react to the changes in their lives and their identity? That is, their sense of who they were. The revolt of 1857 gives us a glimpse into the world of the sepoys. You will read about this revolt in Chapter 5. Conclusion. Thus the East India Company was transformed from a trading company to a territorial colonial power. The arrival of new steam technology in the early 19th century also aided this process. Till then, it would take anywhere between 6 and 8 months to travel to India by sea. Steamships reduced the journey time to 3 weeks, enabling more Britishers and their families to come to a far-off country like India. By 1857, the company came to exercise direct rule over about 63% of the territory and 78% of the population of the Indian subcontinent. Combined with its indirect influence on the remaining territory and population of the country, the East India Company had virtually the whole of India under its control. Elsewhere, slave trade in South Africa. The Dutch trading ships reached southern Africa in the 17th century. Soon, a slave trade began. People were captured, chained, and sold in slave markets. When slavery ended in 1834, there were 36,774 privately owned slaves at the Cape, located at the southernmost tip of Africa. A visitor to the Cape in 1824 has left a moving account of what he saw at a slave auction. Having learnt that there was to be a sale of cattle, farm stock, etc. by auction, we halted our wagon for the purpose of procuring fresh oxen. Among the stock was a female slave and her 3 children. The farmers examined them as if they had been so many head of cattle. They were sold separately and to different purchasers. The tears, the anxiety, the anguish of the mother, while she cast heart-rending looks upon her children, and the simplicity and touching sorrow of the poor young ones, while they clung to their distracted parent, contrasted with the marked insensitivity and jocular countenances of the spectators.